I'm Mr. Roboto, back again with another trade review. Today I want to review just one trade I took, an NVDA calls position. This trade I want to highlight because there's a lot of important things here that I think you can learn from. One, it's how to buy a breakout through a supply zone. Two is how to use volume price analysis when evaluating a pullback. And then three, it's finding a reason to sell your position. So let's dive right into it. So on the daily, NVIDIA looked very good. So ignore today's candle, which is a very big green candle. Just note that there's this morning, there's a gap here. There was a gap potential here, and that NVIDIA was testing this breakout level. It had tested this 2 days in a row now, and there was a good chance that if it broke through this level, that we would get some sort of gap fill here. So this was the setup going into NVIDIA to start the day. Let's dive in closer. So I drew a lot of my zones using the 30-minute time. Let me go ahead and put extended hours on, and you'll see how I got my zones. So again, this is the action that happened today. To start the day, there was a 30-minute supply zone that was right here. I got it using this green basing candle. This one just stood out to me, and that it had actually been tested yesterday. But I took the open of this green basing candle, and I drew my zone all the way up to the top of its wick. So this was my 30-minute supply zone. I did have another 30-minute supply zone. I was using this green basing candle. So as you can see, the price was up here. We sold off, and then we based, and then we sold off again from this green basing candle. So I wanted to note this, but again, this was my primary zone, but I did note this so that if the price action did get into this area, I would be able to take this into account. I just like to make it more transparent so that it's not as prominent as this main zone that I wanted to play off of. As for my demand zone, as you can see, the price was up here. We sold off into the after hours, and then from this red basing candle, the price was brought right back up. So I know that if the price does get back into this area, there's a good likelihood that the price will be brought right back up. So from this red basing candle, I took the open of this candle, and I drew it all the way down to a little bit. This zone, if I would have just drawn it really tight off of this zone, I thought would be too small. So I just made it a little bit bigger. And that's just how I like to play my zones. I could have drawn it down to here, actually, but I thought this was fine. So this was my 30-minute demand zone that I wanted to play off of. There's some more zones and resistance down here that didn't come into play today. There was also a 1-hour supply zone, and this was the gap fill, and this is where the price sold off previously. So if we go to the 1-hour zone, or the 1-hour time frame, you'll see how I got this zone. You can see this green basing candle. Remember, when we're looking for supply, we're looking for green basing candles. This is where the price was bouncing before it sold off. So I took the open of this green basing candle and I brought it up. It's the same thing as this zone. If I brought it just to here, I thought it would be too small or too thin of a zone. So I like to bring it up a little bit. I look for some sort of wick, and this is where I ended up drawing the top of this zone. So from this green basing candle, the open, up to here, this is how I got my 1-hour supply zone. So I knew if Tesla was going to break out today through this 30-minute supply zone, that there would be a good chance that it might go and try to fill in this gap. But with the market context today, there was the FOMC meeting, and there was a lot of uncertainty going into that meeting. So I wasn't 100% confident for holding through any sort of breakout or gap fill today. And we can see how that ended up playing out into my trade. So I took a couple of trades on NVIDIA today, but we'll talk a little bit about how I played the main trades. So this is the intraday action for NVIDIA. What happened today? There was a really good opportunity to buy this dip at open. I did not play this as a dip and rip. That was not in my plan for today. I actually thought that there was a good chance that the market was going to sell off at open and continue selling off. So I did not buy any dips this morning. In hindsight, this would have been a really good dip to buy. It bounced at this 30-minute demand zone almost perfectly. But I did play this breakout, and my plan was if NVIDIA broke through this 30-minute supply with any sort of velocity and volume, that I would like to play calls. So when this move ended up happening from this 30-minute demand zone, I immediately knew that I wanted to get into an NVIDIA. So on this little pullback, I bought some calls here at NVIDIA, and I wrote it out to here, and I sold it right here. This was just a scalp play for me. The whole plan was to scalp it the entire time. Again, my thesis into the day was I wasn't going to hold for any sort of large breakout or gap fill, because with all of the uncertainty with the 2 p.m. FOMC meeting, I just was uncomfortable holding a long position intraday. So that was my first trade on NVIDIA, very small scalp. And then the action that I really like seeing was right here around this area. As you can see, this is what I like to see on bullish stocks. I like to see it break through a supply zone and then start forming a new demand zone above this previous supply zone. Because forming a new demand zone is a natural movement for a stock. People buy it from here and they sell and they ride it up to here, and they're always going to sell and take profits. There's always going to be people who sell and take profits. So it's a very good sign when this happens, because you're just forming a new demand zone. So on the 5-minute, when I started seeing these red candles, it was kind of hard to gauge the volume price analysis on here to decide whether or not I wanted to enter calls. So I like to move up to a higher time frame sometimes, and this makes it easier for me to analyze the volume price analysis. So I'm looking for any sort of volume anomalies that kind of gives me any guess for buyer exhaustion or seller exhaustion, and this helps me identify opportunities where I could potentially enter. So if there's seller exhaustion potentially, then I'd look to enter long. If there's buyer exhaustion, then I'd look to potentially enter short. So that's exactly what we ended up seeing on NVIDIA. On the 15-minute, as you can see, there's this red candle here, and there's another red candle here. But if you look at the volume on these red candles, it's very small selling volume relative to the green candles that came prior to it. So this was a key giveaway for me that this was a good pullback to buy, and that I could go long here, and there's a good likelihood that NVIDIA was going to keep going up for the day. So again, this 15-minute candle, you can see the body of this 15-minute candle is almost exactly the same size as the body of this green candle, right? But look at the volume of this green candle. It might be easier if I do this. Yeah, maybe this will do. Right? So again, look at this candle right here. You see the volume here. It's pretty much, this is how much volume we have on this buying. But on this selling candle, which is the same size as this candle, much less volume. There's probably at least a third less selling volume. So that gives me a hint that the sellers here are having to work much. The sellers here are bringing the price down a lot, but there's not that much actual volume. So that's potentially seller exhaustion. So when I saw this on the 15-minute, I went ahead and entered calls here. So coupled with the volume price analysis and that we had broken through supply and that we were forming a new demand zone above supply, that gave me enough conviction to go into NVIDIA long. And I actually didn't hold these for too long. I ended up selling right around here. And this was a mistake on my part. And this is why I wanted to talk about finding a reason to sell your position. I had no reason to sell my position here. I was just up on the trade. I was kind of happy with my profits, but I failed to see the bigger picture. And the bigger picture was that we did actually have a potential to fill in this gap on the daily. So remember, there was this gap on the daily, and that we were potentially going to realize this. So I had zero reason to sell my position here, but I did end up selling my position. I failed to take a look at the bigger picture. I failed to step back and realize that, hey, you had really good entries down here. Let's ride this out a little bit longer to see if we can make it all the way to this gap though. And as you can see, NVIDIA did at the end of the day almost exactly hit this 1 hour supply. And then after hours, we did actually hit this supply zone. So the lesson I'm taking away from this is that you have to really find a reason to sell your position. There was a little bit of a pullback here, but it didn't pull back further. And there was just no reason to sell here. I could have at least waited to see if the price was going to bounce at this prior resistance. And if it broke through this resistance, then I could have potentially exited my position. But up here, there's no reason to sell. On this, it's just a natural pullback. There's no reason to sell. I could have gotten this entire move here, and realized a lot more from this trade. So those are my trades on NVIDIA. I did a lot of things correctly, but there's one thing I did incorrectly, and that was selling my position when there was no real reason to sell my position. And yeah, that was the main trade I wanted to go over. I thought there was a lot to learn from this one. Again, volume price analysis. I use this almost with every trade, and it helps me formulate a decision of whether or not I want to enter a position. Just seeing the red candle here and how much less volume it had as opposed to this green candle, even though they're the same size, this green candle had this much more volume. So this tells me there's much less selling here, much less actual selling going on. And it's a good opportunity to buy because it's a low volume pullback. And that's it for me. I hope you guys take something away from this. If you haven't followed me yet, my Twitter is Mr. Roboto Trades, and I'll link it in the description. Thanks.